Good evening, Ulrich. Good evening. So happy that you're in link with us from Paris. Here it was 3 days of energy and an amazing works we did, but we are there to welcome you for the final conclusion. And as you know, OCD, it's also for us our basis of insights, of thinking. It's a strong partnership with the Women's Forum since many years. And we are very, very honored, Ulrike, to listen what you have to tell us. And I know that you would have prepared to be with all these amazing women and that you really could not come. It was not your choice, because otherwise you would have been with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chiara. And I think I can just start where I heard the audience leaving off 5 minutes ago by praising you, Chiara, for putting together this extremely important event. And you're right that even though it is 23 degrees and sunny here in beautiful Paris today, I really would have wanted to be with you in person. But we've stayed in contact over the conference last night, and you've told me how you've accelerated the work on gender equality over the last couple of days. And I'm sure that your conference will help lay out a path towards a truly transformative agenda for gender equality. Now, the OECD, as I hope you know by now, very strongly supports placing gender equality at the center of G20 efforts. Women's empowerment is not only a moral imperative, it's not only a social imperative, it is indeed also an economic imperative. We can simply not afford not to benefit from the potential, the talent, the capabilities, the capacities, the competences of half this world's population. It just won't do. And I'm very glad to tell you that we just held our OECD annual ministerial meeting just 2 weeks ago here in Paris. And I think it's fair to say that gender equality featured more prominently than in any other ministerial in the history of the OECD. That was in the statement that was agreed by consensus. A much stronger focus on gender equality than ever before, but it was actually also in the meeting where we tried to put a gender lens to all the issues that we discussed among more than 50 ministers from OECD countries in those 2 days. That meeting, of course, came on top of the highly successful G20 meeting in Santa Margherita, so ably and successfully chaired by Elena Bonetti. I know she spoke earlier today. I'm not sure if she's still with us. But actually, building on that conference in Santa Margherita and our own OECD ministerial, we, as an organization, now stand ready to continue to support both G20 and G7 action to support women's empowerment. We want to help you promote a transformative agenda, and we do thank the Women's Forum and you, Chiara, for the very fruitful discussions and the very ambitious call to action. I think it's fair to say that this call to action very much aligns with our agenda here at the OECD. It should be clear to everyone by now that we must act, and we must act now to address long-standing gender inequalities, because these are in fact inequalities that have even deepened during the COVID-19 pandemic, including gaps in social and healthcare, employment, pay, a share of unpaid work, and also access to finance. We cannot afford not to invest in the potential of women and girls if we are to build back better after this crisis. In 2020, we saw the COVID-19 crisis halt the trend of rising women's labor force participation. The pandemic jeopardized the progress that had occurred since 2012 towards the G20's 25 by 25 Brisbane goal, a progress that was actually already uneven and pretty slow. Also, more generally, gender inequality persists in the labor market. You know the examples, but just to repeat, across the G20, women are more likely than men to be in the informal employment market. They're more likely to have a temporary contract than men, and they are also facing a gender pay gap still between 10 and 40%. Leadership is another area where gaps and inequalities remain shamefully wide. Yes, the female share of seats on boards of the largest publicly listed companies in OECD countries did rise by 4 percentage points between 2016 and 2020, but only to 27%. Another example, in the front line of the pandemic, we all know that women make up 70% of the health workforce, but they only hold 25% of senior decision-making roles. Women should not, women cannot be overlooked as a pillar of the post-COVID-19 sustainable and inclusive recovery. A number of immediate priorities are already set out in the Catania Declaration and the G20 roadmap towards and beyond the Brisbane target, which the OECD, by the way, is very proud to have helped design. So let me just mention 3 of those priorities before concluding. First, we need policies to promote women's labour market participation as well as the quality of employment. This includes recognizing and addressing the care responsibilities disproportionately borne by women. Second, we also need to make further progress in closing gender gaps in education and to bridge the digital gender divide. We need to equip women with the necessary skills and opportunities to thrive in a digital world. If we do not promote the fair and full participation of girls and women in the digital future of our societies, we're really just setting ourselves up for failure. We're setting ourselves up for a digital future that overall will be less rich, less innovative, and less fair. And third and finally, we really need to pursue cultural change to remove gender biases, remove discriminatory laws, norms, and stereotypes that continue to limit women's access to employment. A cultural shift also means applying a gender lens to all decision-making processes and all policy areas. This includes partnering with the private sector, as G20 Empower also highlights, to enhance gender diversity in their decision-making and to design flexible, family-friendly workplaces of the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, I did see at least one gentleman in the audience.
There are.
We are now less than. Are there many? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
we'll never do a panel without men.
I just heard one man. That's really good, Chiara, because as we talked about in Santa Margherita, we really need to have more men involved in this discussion. But let me just say before concluding that we are now less than 2 weeks away from the G20 summit. Under the Italian leadership this year, we've already seen a lot of progress, but the G20 really now has an opportunity to set the path forward for women's empowerment. Looking ahead, it's essential that this effort to mainstream agenda across the entire G20 agenda will also be furthered by the upcoming Indonesian and Indian presidencies. COVID-19 recovery plans offer what is, I think, really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to help build more gender-inclusive labor markets, more gender-inclusive societies, more gender-inclusive economies as a whole. Now is the time to deliver on this ambition, and you can keep counting on the OECD to support you in this effort. So thank you very much all for your engagement, for your passion. Thank you, Chiara, for your leadership, and thank you everyone for the attention.
Ulrich, you will be responsible of a killing. My team will kill me, but I won't show you the proposals because you all wrote this document. Ulrich resumed all the issues and the things that I don't want to say what I prepared for days to tell you what we were called to action. Because in this room, in all these days, you all are with us aligned to this call to action. Please tell Ulrich. We all together want to make a she-covery. We all together want to change the mentalities, to make a shift. We talked about incredible things today. We called to many action. And you know, action is contagious, as somebody said. It's very contagious because you cannot imagine the number of initiatives that have been invented in those 2 days that were not on the paper, but they will have to add. Because all these incredible people who are there have not only been committed, men and women, and Ulrich, yesterday morning we did something important. You were talking about men. Yesterday maybe we were 80% of men and 20% of women, CEOs, signing a very important commitment for the companies. The weight of those companies was more than billion of euros. That means that those companies will lead by examples. They are champions. That means that they will not only show in their companies what they're doing, but also stimulate others to do the same, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's business and performance, not only politically correct. Then this was the start. Then we have now a very precious tool that's the barometer. who compares reality with the stake of how we stand and where we can go with the perception in the G20 countries. It was very precious because it gave us very incredible number, and we seized the interest of the press. We have been extremely first in all social media. They told me first, and I don't know exactly, but we have a very, very strong coverage, not only the Italian media, but worldwide, because the momentum is now. There's really this feeling. And you said Elena Bonetti was with us today. She has been there with us not only today, she has been all the year with us. We are working hand in hand to ensure that ideas, insights, initiatives could be really integrated in what will be proposed at the head of state and government. And tonight, I was supposed to do the conclusion. In fact, I'm not doing conclusion. I will propose you to start something new. We need your talent, we need your leadership, we need your commitment, you need your mobilization, we need all what you want to do in each of your countries. Ulrich, you have representative for almost each of the G20 countries that are here at the highest level. Committed people to go, and together now we have to implement this recovery. We have to do this together, zero gender gap that we signed yesterday. Then my conclusion is, we start now, from now, what are we doing to be ensuring that in a few days, not next year, not in 2 years, what we said, what we thought can really become a reality. Not for us, but for all of the humanity. For the whole of the humanity, because you saw how the contribution of women has been a session and will be a session. Then let's go away from here with plenty of energy and coming back in your countries, do what we just had in mind. And you will see, Ulrike, what comes out of here. I'm completely, how can I say, terrified of the number of things that we have to do, all of us. But men and women together, public and private, highest level stakeholders, together, I'm sure we can do it. And I'm very optimistic because we feel the sense of urgency. And again, we saw what happens if we don't act. We go back to middle age, and we don't go back into middle age. Then we know what we have to do. We know exactly where we want to go. We just have now to implement it and to do it. And your help in the OCDE will be precious for all of us. And you know, all of those people capitalize on your works. Then all of those knows exactly what to see there, I assure you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all these amazing people who traveled for hours and days to be here from very far away. Thank you, a special thanks for the very strong Canadian, Mexican, Emirates, Saudi, Argentina, and of course Europe delegation. I probably missed some, but there was really very strong delegation with very strong messages. And I do hope also that it was not only a way to see what we have to do, but also to find the right people in which we can do things together. This is the strength of what we can do together. It's to find the right people to implement what we want to do. Our ambition is very high. It's just to reach the zero gender gap as soon as possible. This is my conclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. And before we leave, for a cup of champagne, Prosecco, we have a message from Minister Franco, because Minister of Italian Finance, Franco, who wanted to be with us. And as you know, it's how we invest the money who is important. It is very important that we associate the ministers of finance that were with us, and that this She-Covery is another way to invest in favor of women and men together. Please launch the video.
The Italian presidency of the G20 has revolved around three pillars: people, planet, and prosperity. Recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and the surge for a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient global society have been our guiding aims. We are aware that inequalities, and in particular gender inequality, weigh on our prospects for recovery and are a significant obstacle to greater economic growth and prosperity. As stated in the Women's Forum G20 call for action, the zero gender gap ambition will be achieved only if gender is mainstreamed in all policies, strategies, and investments. For this reason, the question of empowering women and reducing gender inequalities is important for finance ministers, who can actively contribute to the mainstreaming of a gender perspective in national economic policies. Coming to Italy, we know that gender inequalities are one of Italy's long-standing problems. Significant progress has been made since 2010, but Italy still ranks 14th in the EU, according to the European Institute for Gender Equality Index 2020. This is due to persistent gender inequalities in earnings and employment, especially for some groups, and for women with young children. Italy also performs less well in terms of gender equality than the average OECD country in terms of the employment rate, the long-term unemployment rate, paid and unpaid hours worked, satisfaction with social interaction, and perceived safety. Gender differences in employment ratio are particularly severe. The employment rate of women in 2019 was only 50% compared to 68% for men. Parenthood has a particularly negative effect on female working conditions in Italy, which has the largest gap in Europe in terms of employment rates of mothers compared to fathers. There is a difference of 30 percentage points. Let me also recall that, as observed in other EU and OECD countries, the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on employment was greater for women than for men. Unlike in previous crises, sectors in which women are overrepresented were hit harder. Regional differences in gender inequality are significant in Italy. While the female inactivity rate in 2020 in the country was on average almost 45%, compared to 26% for men, in southern regions this percentage is as high as 59%, compared to 33% for men. For these reasons, overcoming gender inequalities is one of the three overreaching priorities of Italy's Recovery and Resilience Plan, RRP, the other two being territorial and generational inequalities. Let me recall that the Italian Recovery and Resilience Plan falls within the European Next Generation EU program, which is focused on the green transition, digitalization, and social inclusion. The RRP marks a turning point for Italy's gender equality policy because of its breadth and ambition. So far, efforts to improve gender equality have lacked a comprehensive strategy and have mostly focused on work-life balance and maternity and family support. The National Strategy for Gender Equality, consistent with the EU strategy, was published in July of this year, as foreseen in our recovery plan. The strategy will accompany our RRP, covering the period 2021-2026 and 5 strategic priority areas: work, income, skills, use of time, power. The objective is to improve Italy's rating on the EIGE Gender Equality Index by 5 percentage points by 2026, enabling Italy to join the top 10 European countries within 10 years. A set of indicators and targets will be used to monitor progress in each of the 5 priority areas. As some commentators pointed out at the outset, Next Generation EU's focus on the digital and green transition tends to activate sectors of the economy where employment is predominantly male. Italy's RRP counterbalances this effort by pursuing a horizontal priority of gender parity throughout the 6 missions of the RRP, with measures to encourage and support female participation in the labor market, both directly and indirectly, and to correct asymmetries that represent obstacles to gender equality. The RRP features a number of important measures to encourage and improve female employment. These include investment in nursery and preschools and other family services, public employment practices, investments in economic sectors with high female employment, and a greater focus on STEM and digital skills for girls and women. Other measures to improve the overall functioning of the labor market will also help increase female employment. The activation of new and reinforced social and health services should also make an important contribution to employment in those sectors which have a high degree of female participation. An integrated strategy of financial investment and support services is intended to promote female entrepreneurship. A national certificate system for gender equality will provide incentives for the private sector to adopt policies to reduce the gender gap in all major critical areas, that is career growth opportunities, equal salaries for equal skill and responsibility, management of gender differences, maternity protection. Gender balanced procurement will be required in the call for bids regarding RRP projects. The Italian government and administration will be actively monitoring the impact of RRP reforms and investments on gender equality via indicators disaggregated by gender. Other exercises, such as those using the existing equitable and sustainable well-being framework and gender budgeting, will complement these efforts. In conclusion, gender equality is high on the policy agenda of our government. The RRP marks a major step forward because of both its gender mainstreaming approach and improvement in the enabling fields of health, education, childcare, and social infrastructure. Our approach is largely in line with that proposed in the call for action. We are very much aware that there is still much work to be done. Thank you very much.
No doubt that the Italian presidency really has taken gender equality as a mainstream. And we know that Minister Bonetti, that you know how much she now talks about She-Covery as it was a normal, simple thing, but she wants also to implement it. Now, you learn this by heart, and you implement it in your countries. Promise? I don't hear you. Oh. Before leaving, I would like to really thank you for your friendship, for your support, for who you are and what you're doing. I would also like to thank you, our partners that are with us all the time, working hard, not only with us financial support, but with them bring us brain and ideas and insights. And I would also like to thank, she's no more there, Elizabeth Illy, because you did see the videos. She went on the ground and she asked the young generation what they wanted. And you see it was each time corresponding with what we propose. Then we are really working for the next generation, and let's engage together for a She-Covery for all and to make the better for all. Thank you. And let's share a cup of Prosecco. It's not only champagne in the world, Prosecco is very